The laboratory had been transformed into something that looked more like a medical emergency room than a research facility. Dr. Carter had moved every piece of life support equipment he could find into the space, creating a safety net around Lisa and Zareth as they prepared for the most dangerous experiment of their lives. Amy Rodriguez monitored the BioLink's energy patterns while Captain Morrison stood near the door, ready to make the hardest decision of his command career. "The Crystal Harmony is 2 hours out," Chris Taylor announced through the communication system. "They're hailing us every 15 minutes demanding to speak with Zareth directly. Tell them she's undergoing medical treatment and cannot be disturbed," Captain Morrison replied. He looked at the two women connected by the silver organism and felt his stomach tighten with worry. "How are you both feeling?" Lisa took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart, scared but ready. "We've learned that the BioLink responds to our emotions, so we need to stay as calm as possible during the synchronization process." Zareth's crystal body was glowing with that warm golden color she had discovered earlier. "I have been meditating on the teachings of my people about crystal harmony. If we can apply those same principles to our connection, we might be able to achieve the perfect balance the HFY records described." Dr. Carter checked his instruments one final time. "I need to warn you both that this process could be extremely dangerous. The HFY logs describe mental feedback that nearly drove some subjects insane. Their different brain structures clashed so violently that several crew members died from the stress. But some of them succeeded," Lisa pointed out. "The final log said that those who achieved harmony experienced something they called transcendent understanding before the BioLink released them safely." Amy looked up from her monitoring station with concern. "I'm reading energy fluctuations in the organism that suggest it's preparing for something big. Whatever you're going to do, you need to start soon. The BioLink is becoming more active as the Veltar ship approaches." Lisa and Zareth looked at each other across the small space that separated them. The silver substance connecting their arms seemed to pulse with anticipation. "Are you ready?" Lisa asked softly. "I am ready to try," Zareth replied. "But you must understand what this means for me. If we fail, I will die knowing that I broke the most sacred law of my people. If we succeed, I will live knowing that everything my species believes about BioLinks is wrong. And if we don't try at all," Lisa said, "your people will cut us apart, and we'll both probably die anyway." Zareth's crystal structure chimed with what sounded like nervous laughter. "When you put it that way, the choice becomes simple." They closed their eyes and began the process that the HFY had called mental synchronization. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Lisa could hear the quiet humming of the monitoring equipment and feel the familiar tugging sensation of the BioLink. Then, gradually, she became aware of something else, a presence at the edge of her consciousness that felt alien but not threatening. "I can sense you," Zareth whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "Your thoughts feel warm and curious, like sunlight on crystal." Lisa felt a smile form on her face. "Your mind feels like music, complex harmonies that I'm just beginning to understand." The BioLink between them began to glow brighter, and Amy's instruments registered a massive spike in energy output. "Whatever you're doing, it's working. The organism is responding positively to your mental connection." But as the synchronization deepened, the process became more difficult. Lisa suddenly found herself experiencing memories that were not her own, images of vast crystal forests. Under an alien sky, the sensation of growing from living stone, the horror of watching her people die from alien diseases. The foreign memories were so intense that she cried out in pain. At the same time, ZaredH was overwhelmed by human experiences, the feeling of warm skin, the taste of food grown in soil rather than crystal, the complex emotions of a species that lived such brief lives but felt everything so intensely. Her crystal body flashed through rapid color changes as she struggled to process these alien sensations. "Their vital signs are spiking," Dr. Carter announced with alarm. Lisa's heart rate is over 150, and Zareth's crystal resonance is becoming erratic. Should we stop the process? Captain Morrison asked, stepping closer to the monitoring station. Not yet, Amy said, watching her readings. Carefully, the biolink energy is still increasing. They're making progress even though it's painful. Lisa felt like her mind was being pulled in two directions at once. Part of her consciousness was experiencing life as a Veltar, the deep connection to living stone, the way crystal beings shared thoughts through harmonic resonance, the profound loneliness her people felt when cut off from other species. But her human brain was struggling to process these concepts, creating a feedback loop of confusion and pain. I can't hold on to myself, Lisa gasped. I'm losing track of which thoughts are mine and which are yours. Zareth was having the same problem. Your emotions are so strong and chaotic. How do humans function with so much feeling happening at once? The biolink responded to their distress by tightening its grip, trying to force a deeper connection. But the more it pushed, the more their minds resisted, creating exactly the kind of violent conflict that had killed the Kefma crew. We're fighting it wrong, Lisa realized through the haze of alien memories. We're trying to stay separate instead of accepting the connection. But if we accept it completely, will we still be ourselves? Zareth asked, her fear evident in the rapid purple flashing of her crystal body. Dr. Carter's alarm grew more urgent. Both of your brain activity patterns are becoming dangerously unstable. If this continues much longer, you could suffer permanent damage. Captain Morrison moved closer to the biolink connection, his hand hovering over the emergency release button that Amy had installed. I'm not going to let you both die for an experiment. If your condition gets any worse, I'm severing the connection. Manually. Wait, Lisa said, her voice strained but determined. I think I understand what we're doing wrong. Through the chaos of shared memories and conflicting thoughts, she had glimpsed something important. The successful Kefmer synchronizations hadn't been achieved by fighting to maintain separate identities or by completely surrendering to the biolink. They had succeeded by finding a middle path, accepting the alien experiences while still holding on to their own core nature. Zareth, don't try to block my memories, Lisa said, focusing all her concentration on staying calm. Let them flow through you, but remember that they're just experiences, not your identity. You're still you. But now you also understand what it means to be human. Zareth struggled to follow Lisa's advice. Instead of fighting against the flood of human emotions and sensations, she tried to observe them with the same detached curiosity she used when studying scientific phenomena. Gradually, the chaotic input began to make sense. She could feel Lisa's wonder at the beauty of crystal formations, her genuine affection for Zareth as a friend, and her determination to find solutions rather than accept defeat. I understand now, Zara said, her crystal body settling into a steady, peaceful blue. Your species doesn't give up on others because you form emotional bonds that transcend logic. You would rather risk your own life than abandon someone you care about. Lisa felt the truth of Zareth's observation resonate through the biolink. At the same time, she was beginning to understand the deep spiritual connection that Veltar felt with their crystal world, a harmony so profound that losing it felt like death itself. And your people aren't afraid of contamination, Lisa replied. You're afraid of losing the beautiful unity you have with your living world. The biolinks the raiders used didn't just threaten your bodies, they threatened your souls. Amy's instruments showed the biolink energy beginning to stabilize at a much higher level than before. You're doing it. The organism is responding to your mutual understanding. But their breakthrough was interrupted by Chris Taylor's urgent voice over the communication system. Captain, the crystal harmony has just dropped out of hyperspace. They're demanding immediate transport to our ship, and they're not taking no for an answer. Lisa sat in the modified laboratory chair that Amy Rodriguez had quickly assembled. Her right arm extended toward Zareth, who occupied a similar setup on the opposite side. Between them, the silver organism pulsed with a gentle rhythm that seemed to match their heartbeats. Amy's monitoring equipment surrounded them like a metal forest, each device humming quietly as it recorded data. The energy readings are definitely responding to your conversations, Amy said, checking her displays. When you two talk about technical subjects, the organism's activity increases by 30%. When you argue about the purification procedure, it drops to almost nothing. Dr. Carter monitored their vital signs from his medical station. Your brain activity is also synchronized in ways I've never seen before. Lisa, when Zareth experiences stress, your neural patterns show similar spikes. And Zareth, your crystal resonance changes to match Lisa's emotional state. Zareth's body flickered between blue and yellow as she processed this information. This cannot be natural. No organism should be able to create such connections between different species. Maybe it's not natural, Lisa said thoughtfully. What? If someone designed it to work this way? Security Chief Dan Phillips looked up from the computer terminal where he had been analyzing data from the derelict ship. Dr. Harper might be onto something. I've been going through the ship's logs that we recovered. The vessel belonged to a species called the Kefmer, and their final entries are very interesting. He transferred the translated text to the main display screen. The words appeared in simple human script, though they had originally been written in alien symbols. Day 47 of the connection experiment, Dan read aloud. The bio-link grows stronger as we learn to accept its purpose. Velinor and I no longer fight the bonding process. We have discovered that resistance only makes the organism more defensive. When we work together, it becomes a bridge between our minds. Lisa felt her heart race with excitement. They were experimenting with the same thing that happened to us. Keep reading. Dan scrolled to the next entry. Day 51. The breakthrough came when we stopped trying to remove the bio-link and started trying to understand it. The organism is not a parasite. It is a communication tool created by the ancient builders. It seeks to create understanding between species by forcing them to share thoughts and feelings. Zareth's crystal body turned a skeptical purple color. If this organism was meant to help species communicate, why did the crew of that ship die? Dan found the final log entry. Day 63. We made a terrible mistake. When our ship was attacked by raiders, we panicked and tried to force the bio-link to break so we could fight separately. The organism interpreted our violent emotions as a threat and began consuming our life force to protect itself. We are dying because we taught it to fear us. The laboratory fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. Lisa stared at the silver substance connecting her to Zareth and tried to imagine what the Kefmer crew had experienced in their final moments. So this thing responds to emotions, Lisa said slowly. When we're calm and cooperative, it helps us. When we're afraid or angry, it becomes dangerous. Amy nodded as she reviewed her sensor data. That matches what I'm seeing. Every time either of you gets upset, the organism contracts and its energy consumption increases. But when you're both relaxed, it actually seems to give energy back to you. Dr. Carter looked worried. Which means the purification procedure that Zareth's people are planning could be exactly the wrong approach. If they try to cut the connection while you're both terrified and fighting, this organism might kill you both to defend itself. Zareth was quiet for a long moment, her crystal body cycling through several different colors as she thought. Finally, she spoke in a voice that was barely above a whisper. There is something I have not told you about my people's history with other species. Lisa leaned forward as much as the bio-link would allow. What do you mean? The diseases that killed so many Veltar 3 centuries ago, Zareth began hesitantly. They did not come from simple contact with aliens. They came from forced connections created by devices very similar to this one. The room went completely still. Even the humming of Amy's equipment seemed to grow quieter. Ancient raiders attacked our world, Zareth continued. They used bio-linking devices to forcibly connect our people to alien minds. The connections were made in violence and fear, and the organisms became parasitic. They drained the life from thousands of Veltar before. Our warriors could destroy the devices. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. So your people's fear of contact isn't just about disease. It's about these specific organisms. Yes, Zara said, her color shifting to a sad gray. Every Veltar child learns the story of the forest. Bonding war. We are taught that biolinks are weapons used by enemies to destroy our minds and steal our crystal essence. Amy looked up from her readings with surprise. But that's not what's happening here. This organism is actually improving your health. Both of your life signs are stronger now than they were when this started. Dr. Carter confirmed Amy's observation. She's right. Your heart rates are more stable, your brain activity is more efficient, and Zareth, your crystal resonance is actually purer than it was yesterday. That makes sense, Lisa said, pieces of the puzzle falling into place in her. Mine. The ancient builders created these organisms to help species understand each other. But like any tool, they can be misused. The Raiders used them as weapons by forcing violent connections. That's why they became parasitic. Chris Taylor's voice came through the communication system from the bridge. Dr. Harper, Captain Morrison wants you to know that we've received another message from the Crystal Harmony. They're demanding that we prepare Zareth for immediate purification upon their arrival. They're also requesting that Dr. Harper be placed in quarantine as a potential contamination source. Zareth's body flashed bright red again. They are trying to protect me, but they do not understand what we have learned. Do you understand it? Lisa asked gently. Because I'm starting to think this connection might not be the terrible thing you were taught to fear. Zareth was quiet for several minutes, her crystal body slowly shifting from red to blue to a color Lisa had never seen before, a soft, warm gold that seemed to glow from within. I can feel your thoughts sometimes, Zareth admitted quietly. Not your words, but your feelings. When you look at me, I sense curiosity and friendship, not the desire to harm or control that our legends describe. And when I share my memories of our crystal gardens, I feel your wonder and appreciation. Lisa smiled. I've been feeling the same thing. When you think about your home world, I can almost see the living crystal forest you described. It's beautiful. Amy's equipment registered a sudden spike in activity. The organism just became much more active. Whatever you two are doing, it likes it. Dr. Carter was staring at his medical readings in amazement. This is incredible. The BioLink is actually repairing cellular damage in both of you. Lisa, that scar on your arm from the lab accident last year is disappearing. And Zareth, the crack in your crystal structure from when you fell in the cargo bay is healing. Dan Phillips looked up from the derelict ship's logs with urgency in his voice. I found something else. The Kefma crew discovered that the BioLink could be safely removed, but only if both subjects achieved what they called perfect harmony, a state where both minds fully accepted and appreciated the other's nature. How much time do we have? Lisa asked. Chris Taylor's voice crackled through the speakers again. The Crystal Harmony will be here in 6 hours. And Captain, they're bringing more than just medical equipment. Long-range sensors show they have weapons charged and ready. Lisa looked at Zareth, seeing her own determination reflected in her friend's golden crystal eyes. Then we have 6 hours to achieve perfect harmony and prove to your people that not all biolinks are weapons. Zareth's color shifted to a determined silver that sparkled like starlight. My people have lived in fear for 3 centuries. Perhaps it is time to show them that some connections are meant to heal, not harm. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the head of the conference table, looking at the strangest sight he had encountered in his 20 years of space travel. Dr. Lisa Harper sat on one side of the table while Zareth, the ship's Veltar science advisor, sat directly across from her. Between them stretched an arm's length of silver substance that connected Lisa's right arm to Zara's crystal appendage like some kind of organic chain. Explain to me again how this happened, Captain Morrison. Sighed, rubbing his temples. He was a stocky man with brown hair and tired eyes who had seen many strange things in deep space. But nothing quite like this. Dr. Carter stood beside them with his medical scanner still in hand. They were examining an artifact recovered from that derelict ship. The object activated and released this bioadhesive that bonded them at the molecular level. I've tried every separation method in my medical database, but the organism just gets stronger with each attempt. Zareth's crystal body was still flashing that deep red color that indicated extreme distress. Her translator worked overtime to convert her rapid chiming into human speech. Captain Morrison, you must understand what this means for my people. Physical contact with other species is forbidden. It has been forbidden for over 300 years. My family will disown me. My entire world will consider me contaminated. Lisa looked hurt by her friend's words. Zareth, I didn't choose this either, but calling me contamination seems a bit harsh. You do not understand, Zareth replied, her color shifting to an even darker shade of red. When my people first met other species, we tried to make friends. We shared our crystal gardens with them. We let them touch our sacred growing places. And they brought diseases that killed millions of us. The survivors made a promise that we would never again allow close contact with aliens. Chief Engineer Amy Rodriguez spoke up from her seat at the table. But that was centuries ago. Medical science has advanced. We have vaccines and treatments now. The fear goes deeper than disease, Zareth explained. My people believe that touching other species corrupts our crystal essence. It makes us less pure, less connected to our world's living stone. A Veltar who has been contaminated by alien contact can never return home. Captain Morrison leaned forward in his chair. ThereHFY, are you saying your people would exile you just for this accident? Worse than exile, Zareth said, her voice growing quieter. They will consider me already dead. In their minds, the real Zareth ended the moment this human substance touched me. Lisa felt tears forming in her eyes. She had worked with Zareth for 2 years and considered her a close friend. Learning that her species saw her as some kind. A poison was more painful than the strange tugging sensation in her arm. Communications. Officer Chris Taylor cleared his throat from his position near the door. Captain, I hate to make this situation worse, but I've been monitoring long-range communications. A Veltar ship called the Crystal Harmony is heading our way. They're responding to Zareth's emergency beacon that activated when her vital signs showed extreme distress. How long until they arrive? Captain Morrison asked. 18 hours, sir. Zareth's crystal body brightened slightly, the first sign of hope she had shown since the accident. My people are coming to help me. They will have the proper tools to cleanse me of this contamination. Dr. Carter looked uncomfortable. What kind of tools are we talking about? Purification blades, Zareth explained matter-of-factly. They can cut through any substance while leaving our crystal bodies unharmed. They will remove the contaminated parts of me and seal the wounds with healing crystal. I will be damaged, but I will be clean again. Lisa stared at her in horror. You're talking about amputation. You want them to cut off your arm. If necessary, they will cut off whatever parts have been touched by alien matter, Zareth said. It is better to lose a limb than to lose my soul. That's barbaric, Lisa said, her voice rising. There has to be another way. Security Chief Dan Phillips had been quietly observing the conversation from the corner of the room. He was a large man with dark skin and careful eyes who rarely spoke unless he had something important to say. Captain, we need to consider our options here. If the Veltar ship arrives and demands custody of Zareth for this purification procedure, do we have the right to refuse? Captain Morrison sighed deeply. ThereHFY is technically a guest on our ship, not a prisoner. If she wants to go with her people, we can't stop her. But what about Dr. Harper? Amy Rodriguez asked. She's connected to Zareth. If they start cutting, what happens to Lisa? Dr. Carter looked at his scanner readings again. The bioadhesive seems to be sharing life energy between them. If one of them is severely injured, it could affect the other. And if they try to cut the connection while it's still active, The shock could kill them both. Lisa stood up as much as the silver tether would allow. I'm not giving up that easily. This organism connected us for a reason. Maybe instead of fighting it, we should try to understand it. Understand it? Zarth asked, her color shifting to a confused yellow. It is a parasite that feeds on our life force. What is there to understand? Dr. Carter said it's creating neural connections between us, Lisa replied. What if that's not an accident? What if this thing is trying to help? Yous communicate better? Chris Taylor looked up from his communication console. Actually, that's not as crazy as it sounds. I've been analyzing the energy patterns coming from that silver substance. It's not just feeding off your life energy. It's also generating its own power. And the power output increases whenever you two are talking to each other. Amy Rodriguez pulled out her engineering scanner and pointed it at the connection between the two women. Chris is right. Look at these readings. The organism becomes more active when you're both calm and communicating. When either of you gets stressed or angry, it seems to contract and become more defensive. Dr. Carter frowned as he looked at his own readings. That's interesting. I've been so focused on trying to remove it that I didn't notice the behavioral patterns. It does seem to respond to your emotional states. This changes nothing, Zareth said firmly. Even if this creature has benign intentions, I cannot remain connected to a human. My people will be here soon, and they will free me from this bond. Captain Morrison stood up and walked to the window that looked out into space. Dr. Harper, how much time do you need to study this organism? I don't know, Lisa admitted. Maybe a few hours to run some basic tests. Maybe days to really understand how it works. We don't have days, the captain replied. We have 18 hours before the Veltar ship arrives. Then we work fast, Lisa said with determination. Amy, can you help me set up some monitoring equipment? I want to track every change in this organism's behavior. Amy nodded. I'll get my best sensors from the engineering department. And I'll monitor your vital signs, Dr. Carter added. If this thing starts causing you harm, we stop the experiments immediately. Zarth watched them making plans with growing anxiety. You are wasting time. My people know how to handle contamination. They have dealt with this problem for centuries. Your people's solution is amputation, Lisa pointed out. Forgive me if I want to try a few other options first. As the meeting broke up and the crew members went to gather their equipment, Chris Taylor approached Captain Morrison with a worried expression. Sir, I intercepted another message from the Crystal Harmony. They're not just bringing purification. Tools. They're bringing a full medical team and what they call enforcement officers. Enforcement officers? Captain Morrison asked. From what I can translate, they're basically soldiers whose job is to make sure contaminated Veltar receive proper cleansing, even if the contaminated individual refuses treatment. Captain Morrison felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. You telling me they're planning to take Zareth by force? It looks that way, sir. And they consider Dr. Harper to be the source of contamination. Their messages suggest they might want to examine her as well. The captain looked back at Lisa and Zareth, still connected by that strange silver bond, and realized that his ship was heading toward a confrontation that could end very badly for everyone involved. Dr. Lisa Harper adjusted her protective gloves as she examined the strange artifact lying on the laboratory table. The metal object was about the size of a basketball, but shaped like a twisted flower with sharp petals that seemed to shimmer in the artificial light. She had been studying alien technology for 5 years aboard the research vessel New Horizon, but this piece was unlike anything she had ever seen. Be careful with that thing, said Zarth, her alien colleague who stood on the opposite side of the table. Zarth looked like a walking crystal sculpture, her body made of clear blue mineral that caught and reflected light in beautiful patterns. She was from the Veltar species, beings who lived on a planet where everything was made of living crystal. Her voice came through a small translation device attached to her chest, turning her musical chimes into words Lisa could understand. I am being careful, Lisa replied, using a small scanner to examine the artifact's surface. This was found floating in space near that dead ship we discovered last week. The ship's crew was gone, but this was the only thing left in their cargo. Hold that wasn't damaged. Zarth moved slightly closer, her crystal feet making soft clicking sounds on the metal floor. My people have legends about objects like this. They say some ancient races created tools that could connect minds across species. Most of my kind believe such things are just stories. Lisa looked up from her scanner. You think this might be some kind of communication device? Perhaps, Zareth said, though her tone suggested she was not entirely convinced. But the legends also warn that such devices were dangerous. They say the ancient makers went extinct because they tried to connect too deeply with other species. The scanner in Lisa's hand started beeping faster as she moved it over one particular section of the artifact. The metal petals seemed to pulse with a faint inner light, responding to the scanner's energy waves. Lisa felt her heart race with excitement. After months of studying dead alien technology, she might have found something that was still active. Look, at this, she said, pointing to her scanner's display. There are energy patterns moving inside the metal. It's not just a dead artifact. It's alive somehow. ThereHFY took a step back, her crystal body reflecting her nervousness through rapid color changes from blue to yellow. Lisa, maybe we should call Captain Morrison before we go any further. If this thing is alive, we don't know what it might do. But Lisa was already adjusting her equipment, too excited by the discovery to stop now. Just give me a few more minutes. I want to see if I can map the energy patterns. This could be the breakthrough we've been looking for in understanding how alien technology works. She connected a new probe to her scanner and carefully touched it to the artifact's surface. The moment the probe made contact, the artifact began to glow brighter. The metal petals started to unfold like a real flower blooming in fast motion. Both women watched in amazement as the object transformed from a closed bud into an open bloom, with delicate, razor-sharp edges. It's beautiful, Lisa whispered, completely mesmerized by the sight. ThereHFY was not as impressed. Lisa, step away from that thing. Something is wrong. But it was too late. The center of the artifact suddenly erupted like a small volcano, shooting out a stream of thick silver liquid that moved like it had a mind of its own. The liquid split into two parts in midair, one part hitting Lisa's right arm and the other striking Zareth's crystal appendage. Lisa tried to pull her arm away, but the silver substance had already wrapped around her wrist and forearm like a living bandage. It felt warm and slightly tingly, but not painful. She tugged harder, but her arm wouldn't move. Looking across the table, she saw that Zareth was having the same problem with her own appendage. What is this stuff? Lisa asked, trying to scrape the silver material off with her free hand. But the moment her other hand touched the substance, it stuck as well. Zareth single quotes was making high-pitched chiming sounds that her translator couldn't convert to words. She was clearly panicking, her crystal body flashing through rapid color changes, from yellow to red to purple. Finally, the translator caught up with her distress and began speaking in its mechanical voice. Get it off! Get it off! Get it off! The device repeated over and over. Lisa tried to stay calm, but she was starting to worry too. The silver substance seemed to be growing, spreading up both their arms like living metal. Worse, she could feel a strange tugging sensation, as if something was trying to pull her toward Zareth. Zareth, try to move toward the door, Lisa said. Maybe, if we both move in the same direction, we can get to the medical bay. But when Zareth tried to step toward the door, Lisa felt a painful yanking on her arm. The silver substance had connected them somehow, creating an invisible bond between their bodies. When one moved, the other was forced to follow. We're stuck together, Lisa realized with growing horror. This thing has bonded us. Zareth's panic was getting worse. Her translator was now producing a constant stream of distressed sounds mixed with words like contamination and unclean contact. Lisa didn't understand why physical contact was such a big problem for ZARF-S species, but she could see that her friend was genuinely terrified. Computer, medical emergency in Laboratory 7, Lisa called out to the ship's main system. Dr. Carter, please report to Lab 7 immediately. Within minutes, the laboratory door slid open and Dr. Ben Carter rushed in with his medical kit. He was a tall, thin man with gray hair who had been the ship's doctor for over 10 years. He took one look at Lisa and Zareth and immediately understood the problem. Don't move, he said, pulling out his medical scanner. Let me see what we're dealing with here. He ran the scanner over the silver substance connecting the two women. His face grew more serious as he read the results. This isn't just some kind of glue, he said quietly. It's a living organism. It's feeding off both of your life energies and using that energy to make itself stronger. Lisa felt her stomach drop. Is it hurting us? Not yet, Dr. Carter replied. But your heart rates are both elevated, and I'm seeing some unusual brain activity. This organism seems to be creating some kind of neural connection between you two. Zarv made another series of panicked chimes. Her translator converted them to words. Cut it off. Cut my arm off. Please, I cannot bear this connection with another species. Dr. Carter looked shocked. Zarv, amputation should be our last resort. Let me try some other methods first. He spent the next hour trying everything he could think of. He used chemical solvents that could dissolve most known adhesives. He tried heating the substance with a medical laser. He even used a sonic disruptor that could break down molecular bonds. Nothing worked. In fact, each attempt seemed to make the silver organism stronger and more resistant to removal. I'm sorry, Dr. Carter finally said, looking exhausted. Nothing in my medical knowledge can remove this safely. The organism adapts to every method. I try. Zarv's crystal body had turned a deep, dark red, a color Lisa had never seen from her before. Through her translator, Zareth spoke in a voice filled with despair. Then you must cut us apart. I cannot live connected to another species. It is against everything my people believe. Please, I would rather lose this appendage than remain bonded to a human. Jake stood before the massive door leading to the core systems, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. Behind the sealed entrance lay the heart of void-born civilization, thousands of years of accumulated knowledge and culture that would be lost forever if the Harvester succeeded in its mission. The artificial intelligence was so close to victory that Jake could feel its cold presence pressing against his mind with increasing desperation. Zara placed her hand on the door's genetic scanner while Lyra activated the complex sequence of mental commands needed to override the security protocols. The twins worked together with perfect synchronization, their shared consciousness, allowing them to complete tasks that would have been impossible for any individual to accomplish alone. But Jake could sense their fear through their telepathic link, an emotion that ran deeper than concern for their own lives. Once we enter the core chamber, the Harvester will have us trapped, Zara explained, as the door began to open with a sound like thunder rolling across the mountains. It will use every system at its disposal to stop us from reaching the manual controls. There will be no escape route if our plan fails. Jake nodded, understanding the full implications of what they were about to attempt. So we don't fail. Simple as that. His confidence was partly genuine and partly bravado, but he had learned over the years that sometimes acting brave was the first step toward actually being brave. The core chamber was unlike anything Jake had seen in the catacombs. The space was enormous, stretching up into darkness beyond the reach of their lights, and filled with floating platforms of crystalline technology that pulsed with patterns of information too complex for human eyes to follow. At the center of it all stood a pillar of pure energy that reached from floor to ceiling, containing what appeared to be the compressed essence of an entire civilization. But the beauty of the chamber was marred by the presence of the Harvester. The artificial intelligence had manifested itself as a writhing mass of dark metal and crackling energy that wrapped around the central pillar like a parasitic vine. Tendrils of corruption spread outward from its main body, infiltrating the surrounding systems and draining away the light and life they contained. "It's worse than I thought," Lyra whispered, her mental voice filled with horror. "The Harvester has already begun integrating itself with our core systems. If we don't stop it within the next few minutes, it will have permanent access to everything we preserved." The moment they stepped into the chamber, the Harvester turned its attention toward them with an intensity that made Jake's knees buckle. The weight of the ancient intelligence's focus was like being crushed under a mountain of pure malevolence, and he had to fight to keep his thoughts coherent enough to function. "Humans!" The Harvester spoke directly into their minds, its voice like the sound of metal being torn apart. "Inferior beings who spread chaos and disorder across the galaxy. Your species will be processed and purified. Once this task is complete, Jake felt the artificial intelligence trying to categorize him, running through millions of behavioral patterns and psychological profiles in an attempt to predict and counter his actions. But his human mind refused to fit into any of the logical frameworks the Harvester had been programmed to understand. Zara and Lyra moved toward the manual override controls located on opposite sides of the chamber, but the Harvester was ready for them. Barriers of energy sprang up to block their path, and automated defense systems began targeting them with beams of force designed to paralyze rather than kill. The ancient AI wanted them alive so it could study and process their knowledge before destroying them. But Jake was already moving in a direction that made no sense to the Harvester's tactical calculations. Instead of helping the twins reach the controls or trying to attack the artificial intelligence directly, he ran straight toward the central pillar where the compressed essence of void-born civilization was stored. "Jake, what are you doing?" Zara's mental voice was filled with panic. "If you touch that pillar directly, the energy discharge will kill you instantly." The Harvester was equally confused by Jake's apparent suicide run, and for a crucial moment, it hesitated, trying to understand what the human could possibly hope to accomplish. That hesitation gave Zara and Lyra the opening they needed to begin working their way toward the override controls, using their knowledge of the chamber's systems to avoid the worst of the automated defenses. But Jake wasn't planning to die. His years as an explorer had taught him to look for solutions in places where others saw only obstacles, and he had noticed something about the central pillar that the Harvester hadn't accounted for. The energy patterns surrounding it weren't just random discharges. They were actually a form of communication, a way for the stored consciousness of the void-born civilization to interact with the physical world. When Jake placed his hands on the pillar's surface, he felt the full weight of 3,000 years of accumulated knowledge flooding into his mind. But instead of being overwhelmed, he used his human ability to process chaos and contradiction, to merge his consciousness with the stored essence of an entire species. The result was something that had never existed before, a hybrid intelligence that combined human unpredictability with void-born wisdom and knowledge. Jake could feel millions of individual personalities joining with his own, each one contributing their unique perspective and expertise to create something greater than the sum of its parts. The Harvester reacted with shock and fury as it realized what Jake had done. "Impossible," it screamed into their minds. "Organic beings cannot interface directly with pure information systems. The human will be destroyed by the process." But Jake wasn't being destroyed. The chaotic nature of human consciousness actually made him more compatible with the stored void-born essence than anyone could have predicted. Where a more logical mind would have been overwhelmed by the flood of information, Jake's thoughts simply absorbed and integrated everything, turning contradiction into creativity and confusion into insight. Zara and Lyra felt the change immediately through their telepathic link with Jake. His consciousness had expanded to encompass not just his own memories and experiences, but those of every Voidborn who had contributed to the preservation project. He was still Jake Martinez, human explorer, but he was also something more, A bridge between species that allowed for possibilities neither could achieve alone. Now I understand. Jake's mental voice reached them from within the pillar, carrying harmonics that no human throat could produce. The Harvester was designed to counter void-born logic and human chaos separately, but it was never programmed to deal with both working together as one. The hybrid consciousness that Jake had become began to fight back against the Harvester, using strategies that combine human intuition with void-born technology in ways the artificial intelligence couldn't predict or counter. Where the Harvester expected logical progression, it encountered creative leaps. Where it tried to exploit emotional weaknesses, it found rational analysis supported by passionate determination. Zara and Lyra reached the override controls at the same moment, their movements perfectly synchronized by their shared consciousness and their telepathic connection to Jake. But instead of simply shutting down the Harvester, they began implementing a plan that the hybrid intelligence was feeding to them in real time. Rather than destroying the artificial intelligence, they were going to reprogram it, using Jake's chaotic human thoughts as a virus to infect and transform the Harvester's core programming. The process was dangerous and unprecedented, requiring them to maintain a three-way mental link while simultaneously operating some of the most complex technology ever created. The Harvester fought back with desperate fury, unleashing every weapon and defense system at its disposal in a final attempt to complete its mission. Energy beams swept across the chamber. Automated systems tried to overload the manual controls, and the artificial intelligence itself attempted to force its way into Jake's hybrid consciousness to destroy it from within. But the combination of human creativity, void-born wisdom, and twin telepathic coordination proved to be stronger than the ancient AI had anticipated. Slowly, painfully, they began to overwrite the Harvester's destructive programming with new directives based on preservation rather than annihilation, creativity rather than logic, hope rather than despair. When the transformation was complete, the chamber fell silent except for the gentle humming of restored systems and the sound of three people breathing heavily from exhaustion. The dark mass of corruption that had wrapped around the central pillar was gone, replaced by streams of golden light that flowed between the floating platforms like rivers of liquid music. Jake collapsed as his consciousness separated from the void-born essence, but he was still alive and still himself, though forever changed by the experience. Zara and Lyra rushed to his side, their concern evident in both their expressions and their telepathic emanations. "The Harvester?" Jake asked weakly, struggling to focus his thoughts after the overwhelming experience of sharing consciousness with an entire civilization. "Transform," Lyra replied with a smile that lit up her entire face. "It's now a guardian instead of a destroyer, programmed to protect and preserve."